I've shared before on occasion when my youngest son Jonathan was 11 or 12 years old and came to my office and said, "Dad, come down to the gym in the Family Life Center. I want to show you something." So I went to him with the gym and, "What do you want to show me?" He says, "I want you to see me dunk the basketball." I said, "That's interesting." So he got the basketball, dribbled it a few times, and grabbed it, ran up, and 11, 12 years old, dunked the basketball. Very impressive, except for one thing. He had gotten the custodian to lower the goal. In other words, he lowered the standard and made a dunk. I got the custodian to raise the standard to what its position ought to be and tell him, "Okay, I see what you did, but the idea is to get to 10 feet, not to make 10 feet 6 feet. To rise and raise to the standard." Israel had lowered the standard, was dunking the worship ball, and was excited that they were dunking at a lower standard. God comes on the scene in Malachi and says, "I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed that you can worship dunk at 6 feet when the goal is 10. He says in verse 11, "I'm a great king. I'm not your ordinary king. I am in a class all by myself. The highest office in our land is the presidency of the United States. We talked about that on last time, and there's only a position for one person in that office. God says there's only a place for one God in this universe, and you are not he. I am a great king. In fact, I am so great that one day all the nations of the earth are going to burn incense to me. And there will be comprehensive cosmic recognition. I am in a class all by myself. But in the meantime, I've chosen you, Israel," the book of Malachi, Israel, "to get a head start on everybody else in recognizing my greatness." The book of Malachi, as we continue to unfold it, is a book of questions and complaints. The people are complaining God is nowhere near. He can't be found. He's not blessing them. He's not taking care of them, and we still going to church. We still worshiping you, and you're not coming through for us. We don't get it. And God's complaint back is, the reason you're not seeing me is you're dunking at a lower standard. That is, you're not giving me what my name calls for. You're just giving me what you want. And even that, your governor wouldn't take. Lambs that are blind and lambs that can't walk and riddled with cancer, and you bringing them and offering them, and you don't understand why I'm not all that excited about you showing up at church so that I can receive your leftovers. I am a great king. They want to know, what are we doing wrong? Well, in addition to the leftover worship that they were giving him, he says in verse 12, something that I want to focus on today. He says in verse 12, "For you say that the table of the Lord is despised." The table of the Lord. I hear you. I hear what you say. And you're saying, why we got to do this? Now let me tell you what the table of the Lord is, or was back in Malachi's day. It was the altar. It was the altar. On the altar is where they sacrificed the animals to God. They would slit the throat of the lamb or the sheep or whatever was being sacrificed, drain the blood, and it was like a messy. They had to kill this animal, and they said, "Oh, we got to do this again. We got to cut the throat. We got to drain the blood. We got to offer the sacrifice." He even says, it goes on to say in this passage, "I see you sniffing at it." Going, sure, we got to smell this stuff again. And then he says, and you say, how tiresome it is. Oh, we got to go there again. We got to do this sacrifice again. We got to drain this blood again. Again. He says, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're saying, and I know how you feel. Why? Why is God upset, if I can use that word, at their complaint about the table, the altar? What was it about this table that they should not have been complaining about? In fact, they should have been excited about the table, but instead they were weary about the table. Let's talk a little theology for a moment. God is transcendent. Transcendence simply says that he sits outside of his creation. Now, he is involved with his creation. He's immanent, but he is transcendent. I mean, that's pretty spectacular that God is greater than the sum total of everything he's made. And he's made the universe, which is why when you get to heaven, it will take you an eternity to learn about him, because there is no end to him. Because he's greater than everything that we've made. And we can't even get to the end of our galaxy, more or less the whole universe. He is greater than the sum total of what he's made. He's a great king. Now, at the core of his transcendence is his holiness. That is his uniqueness. Everything about him is distinct from anything else. The problem occurs is that when sin entered the picture, it created a blockage between the transcendent God and man. Because one of the things about God that is holy is his righteousness, that is his separation from sin. So this transcendent God could not have fellowship with sinful man. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve, and all the way forward, God's transcendent righteousness could not interact in a meaningful way with sinful men, because guess what? He does not lower the standard. He can't. It would be against his character to lower the standard. So what God did was come up with a way where sinful men could remake contact with him. And the way he did it was by setting up in the Old Testament a sacrificial system. And the goal of the sacrificial system was to create a substitute. Because sin had to be addressed, but because God loved man, he came up with a way to address it by creating a substitutional sacrificial system where you could offer an animal on behalf of the people, and the death of the animal would serve as a temporary solution to the blockage between transcendent, righteous, holy God and sinful man. Now, the reason that that sacrificial system was critical was because it freed God up to bring to people the provisions of his covenant. Now, you got to stay with me here. We're going somewhere. Now, I can't get into the covenant today. The covenant comes in next week's sermon. So y'all come back now, you hear? You'll see the word covenant in chapter 2 repeated. So we won't get into that, but I will just introduce it by saying this. I mentioned it last week, Deuteronomy 29:9. Covenants are designed to bring blessings. Okay? So a covenant is an arrangement through which God flows to bring you what God has planned for you. That's a covenant. And everybody wants to be blessed, but here's the problem. Everybody wants to be blessed without necessarily being under the covenant. All right? So stay with me. God made a covenant, an agreement, an arrangement with Israel, and it was a covenant of blessing. But God could not fulfill what he wanted to fulfill unless he dealt with the problem of sin. Because he was transcendent and holy and righteous, and man was sinful, so he set up a system to temporarily deal with sin. I call it, the Old Testament, the layaway plan. Okay? Because it only provided a temporary payment. It wasn't a permanent payment. The payment had to go on all the time. The big day was the Day of Atonement, when they would take a goat and they would kill the goat, and then the priest would come and lay his hands on the second goat, called the scapegoat, and then they would take the scapegoat out the nation to signify the sins of the nation were being removed, so God would be free to operate within his covenant for Israel. Sometimes the scapegoat would wander back in camp, so they get a little shepherd boy to take it out and push it off the cliff. The Greek word for that is apolutrosis, pushed off, never to show up again. All right? So they had to go through this routine because of God's unique relationship through the crafting of a substitute in order to free God up to do for the people what God had promised to do. The book of Malachi is their complaint, and you'll see it come up because they got locust problems that won't go away. Their economy is in wreck. The families are in disaster. You know, in other words, America. They got all this stuff going wrong, and they want to know why God not blessing them, why God's not showing up for them, why God's not coming through for them. While they say the table of the Lord is despised. I'm tired of this. Well, what they did not understand was, if it weren't for the table, if it wasn't for the sacrificial system, you could have no contact with God. That the contact with God was tied to the table. And when there was no table, when there was no system operating that freed the transcendent God from interacting imminently with sinful man, that you would now be subject to the consequences, watch this, of the absence of God from your life and from your nation. So when they remove themselves from the table or despise the table by lowering the standards, that allowed, as you'll see referred to a number of times in the book, the curse to come. That is, the negative repercussions of sinful men having a blockage that's not linking them to God. He says, you're tired of something that's the source of your life. You're tired of something that's keeping you in contact with me. You're tired of something that's keeping the covenant on your behalf. You're tired of something that's keeping the curse away. You're tired of something that is responsible for the blessing to flow. You should be excited every time you have to do this nasty job, because this nasty job is the way you're going to be delivered, preserved, healed, freed. This nasty job is the thing that keeps me linked to you, because I can't lower my standard, but I can accept the substitute. I will accept the substitute, but I can't change the rules of the game. That's the covenant. So he's there saying, I am a great king. You should be excited. I know you don't like it. I know it's bloody. I know, it doesn't smell good when the meat's cooking on the altar. I know there is inconvenience. But if you could ever see what this thing could do for you, if you took this table seriously, you wouldn't complain. You'd be hopscotching and flipping and jumping and jerking to get to that table, because that table was transforming in nature. Now, we now flip to the New Testament. The division in the Bible is between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Or let's put it another way. Between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The Bible is divided by covenants. That is, by arrangements that God has. He had an arrangement in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, with Israel. He has an arrangement in the New Testament, the New Covenant, with the church. Both covenants have a table. So what you do is you filter Old Testament principle to New Testament theology teaching. So I want to use the Old Testament principle and take a trip to the New Testament table, because the principle is carried forth covenantally. That is the principle that it is the table that frees God up to move on your behalf. And it is the despising of the table that removes God from being able to move on your behalf. In other words, some of us aren't benefiting from the covenant because we have the same view as in Malachi about the table. Their view of the table was, I'm sick of this. God's view was, if you only knew what that table meant. You up there complaining about the thing that's designed to solve your problem, to bring you deliverance, and to give you victory. So let's turn our Bibles to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and let's look at the table a little bit closer. And then we're going to look at it a little bit closer than that. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. The Bible says that the Old Testament was written for our example. It gives us a framework. Now, he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 these words. He says, beginning in verse 16, is not the cup of blessing which we bless a sharing in the blood of Christ? Is not the bread which we break a sharing in the body of Christ? He's talking about communion, and he says, when you break the bread, you share in the body. When you drink the cup, you share in the blood. There is a sharing of the person. Body and blood is the whole person. When you commune with me, you're not just eating bread and drinking a cup, you're sharing a life. Okay? So yeah, you got a piece of bread and you got a cup, but with the bread and the cup, you're actually entering into the life. So it's not just, in Malachi, they said, I'm tired of this ritual. In Corinthians, they were tired of the same ritual, because in both testaments, they lost sight of the meaning. They thought, well, we just going through it. Okay, we got to do this. Okay, give me the bread, give me the cup. Paul in Corinthians said, hey, you done missed it. You are sharing the life. Now, why do you need to know that when you take communion, you're sharing the life? 1 Corinthians chapter 10, let's go down a few verses and let's look and see verse 21. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of, watch this, the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Oh, do you know what we just discovered? There are two tables. There are two tables. A table is a place where you eat. He says, the Lord has a table and demons have a table. He's writing to Christians. And he says, you Christians at Corinth are trying to eat at two tables. On Sunday, like in the Old Testament on Saturday, you come to the Lord's table, fussing and cussing. The table is tiring. But then you go out and you mix it up with the pagans and you go to another table. Because there are two tables. Remember, the purpose of the table is to share the life. Okay, watch this now. So the first thing you need to know is that in the New Testament church, there were demons. He says there are demons. Okay, there's the Lord, but there is this unseen power force called demons. You wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities, powers, and world forces that are demonic in nature, and they actually invite you to have dinner with them. Why do demons invite you to have dinner with them? So that they can share their life with you. Stick with me now. The Lord has a table, and we said the cup of blessing, the bread, the body, is to share the life. He says there are two tables there. The Lord offers you his table. Now, here's what you need to know. Many of the problems we have are not merely problems because of the problems, but because of the demonization of the problem. In other words, the problem is made worse because demons have adopted the problem. So you're not just battling the problem, you're battling the demonization of the problem, which is why the problem won't go away, because demons keep it coming back. You think the problem is only the problem when the problem is that at the table you happen to be sitting at, the liars of the demons have joined the problem, so the problem is in control by demonic influence. So to fix the problem, you can't just fix the problem, you've got to fix the demon's engagement with the problem. He says because at this table, demons are involved. It's not just the issue, it's the sharing of the life. What many Christians don't understand is that while you may eat at the Lord's table on Sunday, if you switch tables, you get to share the life of the demons. So we're actually battling the wrong problem. We're battling the things we see, not the demons that have entered into the things we see. So we're not battling the thing that we really need to get rid of. And that's why it either doesn't go away or it keeps coming back. Look, if you happen to see, I know you don't have this in your houses, but if you happen to see a roach, you stomp on a roach, it's gone, kinda. Because behind the wall are nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts, and cousins. Unless you get the Orkin man who gets behind what you see to deal with what you can't see, all you've done is temporarily resolve the problem that's going to return tomorrow. There are demons behind the wall. So just because you stomp on your issue today won't solve it, because there's a new replacement tomorrow, because you've not addressed the influence of the table because you share the life. Okay? It is the sharing of the life that's the issue. It's not the eating of the bread or the drinking of the cup. He says we share his life with the bread and share his life with the cup. But wait a minute. I thought I'm already saved. If I'm already saved, I'm not already sharing his life? Well, yes and no. If you're married, you are sharing the life of somebody, and somebody's sharing your life because you are legally sharing it, because you got married. But we all know you can be both married and miserable. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You can be both married and miserable. In other words, you can have the legal sharing without the relational sharing. Now, when a couple is physically intimate, sexually intimate, they are now sharing life at another level. Okay? You are sharing life simply because you're married. That's legal sharing. But sexual intimacy is a sharing of life because you are sharing one another at a more intimate, intense level. Now, so you can be relationally connected without intimately connected. A lot of Christians are relationally, legally saved without being intimately connected with the sharing of Jesus' life. So, not to be crude here, but Jesus Christ is inviting you out of the kitchen into the bedroom to share his life at another level. Because these people are already saved, he's talking to, but he's telling them that there's this other table, and this other table wants to share their life with you too. They want to share their life with you too, but the problem is this other table is demons. And so they want your life. They want to give you their life. Why don't we share lives together? Why don't we hang out together? Let's share life. But with their life comes sin. So there is a table, and the table is tied to the covenant. But turn over one page to 1 Corinthians 11. Talk about the table. Verse 23. 1 Corinthians 11. For I have received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you. That the Lord Jesus, in the night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took the cup, and after supper said, "This cup is the new," here it is, "covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." And then here's the whopper, verse 26. "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes." Now watch this. Remember, chapter 10, communion is the sharing of the life, not just the exercise of the act. It's the sharing of the life. The Old Testament had a temporary plan. It was the table, the sacrificial system. But when Jesus Christ came, John the Baptist says in John chapter 1, "Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world." He came up with the permanent payment. When Jesus died on the cross, he said, "Tetelestai." The Greek word means paid in full, or it is finished. In other words, no more payment needed. On the cross, all sin for all mankind was completely and permanently paid for, to be realized by anyone who comes and places their faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ for their salvation. Now watch this. When a person comes to Christ, they are forgiven, experientially forgiven for their sins. Now we got that. If you're saved, you got that. Okay, I've been forgiven for my sins. But hell is still messing with me. Hell is still messing with me. And it messes with me in a lot of different ways. It messes with me with my money. It messes with me with my mind. It messes with me in health issues. It messes with me. And hell is, see, the problem is we see problems but don't see the hell attachment. You see? Well, we'll be up to our nose in debt, illegitimate debt, but not connected with demonic activity and money. We won't connect it. We don't connect hell with it. And hell doesn't want you to connect it with it, because then you might do something about it. As long as he can just make you stare at the problem and not see the hell connection, the table, that you're actually sharing a life's hell in the area of finance, or in the area of relationships, or in the area of sex, or in the area of, or whatever. If you don't see the spiritual, then you're going to miss how to deal with the thing you think is the real problem. He says on the cross, here it is now, on the cross, Colossians 2:15, you don't have to turn there, but Colossians 2:15 says that on the cross, Jesus defeated the devil and put him to open shame, it says, publicly disgraced him. In the spiritual realm, on the cross, not only were sins defeated, the devil was defeated. Okay? Now watch this. The devil was defeated. You and I no longer have to sit at his table, although we constantly get invitations to join him for dinner. And he is defeated. Freeing God up to work his covenant on your behalf. God is now freed up by the death of Christ, but watch this, but only if you're at his table. So he comes up with this table we call it communion. It's the table of the Lord's Supper. And here's what he says. Now, this is where all this is going. "This is my body," verse 24 says, "which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Now watch this. Verse 23 says that when he called them together, he gave thanks. Now wait a minute, I don't get that. He getting ready to die and he giving thanks. What is he giving thanks for? He says, "I'm giving thanks because this is broken for you." The reason I'm giving thanks is because what it's going to do for you. It's going to do something for you. That's why the communion is called the Eucharist, or the giving of thanks. Because at the time you take communion, you should be more thankful than any other time. You should be more thankful than the sermon you hear, or the song you like, or the building you're in, because none of that defeated Satan. My sermons can't defeat Satan. These singers can't defeat Satan. They can teach, they can inspire, but they have no power in and of themselves. But communion, for which you really ought to give thanks for, is the thing that should send you through the gazoo. Why? Because of what he says in verse 26. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Proclaim his death to who? About what? What am I proclaiming? Okay, you give me the bread, you give me the cup, but it says you're doing more than taking the bread and cup. It says you're preaching a sermon. But I'm preaching a sermon to who? About what? Here's the good news of communion. Communion is not merely taking bread and drinking cup. It's sharing Christ's life. When you share Christ's life, you get to preach a sermon. To who? You get to preach a sermon to the demons. Because it's the demons that are your problem, because they got this competing table. Around communion, you get to say to hell or to the devil what you want to say to people. Go to hell. You literally have permission around the table to tell the demons and the devil to go to hell, because that's their home. You just tell them, go back home. In other words, communion is the place of covenantal authority. You won't get it in a sermon, you won't get it in a song, but you will get it at the Lord's table. Because he says, there you get to proclaim my death. What did my death do? Colossians 2:15. It put the devil under your feet. It defeated him. The reason he has more victory than he ought to have in our lives is we're not sharing Christ's life. We have legal marriage without intimate relationship. And he says the place you get that is at the table, which it says, that's why it says, and as often as you do it. He doesn't tell you how much to do it. Here it is, as often as you need it. See, that's it. So if the devil's busting you up weekly, you better take it weekly. See, people say, well, I take communion once a month. Well, look, if he's jacking you up, that's too big a gap to not have power. So he says, as often as you do this, you proclaim to hell the victory of my death. We would have less victory if we spent more time at his table. Now, we offer it every week here. We don't expect that everybody's going to take it every week. But if hell is telling you what to do, controlling your mind, your emotion, your health, your money, your attitude, your relationship, your action, he says that's because you don't take my table seriously. Do this in remembrance of me. He's not talking about quiet organ music and you picturing a cross. Number one, he's not on the cross anymore. What he's saying is, what I did 2,000 years for you on Calvary, you can bring up to today, because there is not power in the juice, but there's power in the blood. And if you bring my life back up to you today and share my life in communion, you get to tell the devil where to go. He goes on in the next verse and says, but if anyone takes it unworthily. The word worthy doesn't mean you're sinless. He means illegitimate. He says if anyone takes it illegitimately, that is like Malachi was taking it. Just ritual, routine. Let me do it because they passing it. Illegitimately, he makes a statement here many people understand. He says many are weak, many are sick, and some are dead. Die before their time. Weakness means you're being overcome by your circumstances. Sickness can be physical sickness, emotional sickness. And then some die early. Why is all this negative stuff happening when I don't take it legitimately? Because the demons are allowed to have their way with sin in your life. And so when he has his way of sin in your life, you might wind up with AIDS. If he has his way with sin in your life, you might wind up having a mental breakdown. If he has his way with sin in your life, you might wind up getting divorced. If he has his way with sin in your life, you may wind up living a life of misery. Because he's having his way. It's not that God is putting all this on you. It's that because you do not take his table seriously, you're not getting the benefits of the table, so that the devil is able to have his way with you. at 30 minutes ago, a game started 30 minutes ago, right? A game. I'm just surprised nobody ain't got nothing left yet. Just a game happened. See, because when you realize what the table means, the game can wait. You can TiVo that. You can TiVo that. But 30 minutes ago, the game began. But watch this. Before the game, there's a pregame meal. See, before the game is a war. The game is a battle. The game is a conflict. The game is a competition. But before the game, there's a pregame meal. The pregame meal is to give you the nutrition that you need before you go into the battle you're getting ready to face. God's got a pregame meal. I'm going to meet hell at work tomorrow. I'm going to meet hell with my family. I'm going to meet hell with my circumstances. God, I need a pregame meal. I need you to give me nurturing so that I have the energy necessary to tell those devils where to go. And I know where to tell them to go. I'm just going to tell them to go home. You can go to hell because Jesus has already visited me from heaven because I am sharing in his life. Don't be ashamed of what the power source is in the church. It's not the pulpit. It's not the choir stand. They have their place. It's in the table because it's there where you share his life. And when you share his life, guess what you share? His victory. Because his death was victory. You share his victory. Just like a hungry car has got to pull up to a filling station, a starving Christian better come to the communion station because that's where the filling comes for the battles that you face ahead. A little girl was ashamed of her mother. Her mother, she was so ashamed of her mother because her mother had a scar on the side of her face. She said, mother, I don't introduce you to my friends. I don't take you to the PTA meeting because I'm so ashamed of your scar. Mother said, let me explain how I got this scar. You were a baby in the house. The house caught on fire. I was outside at the well. I saw the house was on fire. My baby was in trouble. I ran into the house. I picked up my baby. On my way out the house, one of the beams on fire broke. Slapped me upside of the face as I threw you to safety. So the only reason I'm looking like this is because I was delivering you. The only reason I'm looking like this is I was setting you free. The only reason I look like this is I was giving you the victory while I went down in defeat. When you get to heaven, there's going to only be one scarred person up in heaven. You're going to have a brand new face, brand new hair, brand new body, brand new leg. Everything about you is brand new. But there's going to be one person up there with a scar. He's going to have nail prints in his hand, a scar in his side, and nail prints in his feet. So forever you can remember, the only reason I get to be up here forever is because he got slammed on my behalf. He was wounded for my transgression. He was bruised for my iniquity. The chastisement of my peace was upon him. But guess what? By his stripes, I am healed. There is victory at the table. So I'm going to ask our men to come. And right now, I want you to meet the Lord at the table. And at the table, you bring your sins, but you also bring your circumstances. And then you, right now at the table, have a conversation with hell. Satan, you've been messing with me for years. In my mind, in my body, in my circumstances, in my home. And I've been going to church, but nothing has gotten better. I hear the sermons, but nothing is changing. So right now, I'm sicking Jesus on you because I'm sharing his life. You can go to hell now because you got to deal with Jesus now, not just me.